If I can tell you anything of value, it is that the most important thing you do from here is to hold on to one another. Because the truth is, you can't do it alone, and it isn't as much fun. The truth is that we need each other, probably now more than ever. There is so much to reinvent, so much to make better than it is.
How does an investment analyst at Goldman Sachs become one of the most celebrated female independent filmmakers of the last decade? For Brit Marling, it all started with trying to blend in. The daughter of real estate developers, Brit had a pretty nomadic American childhood that pushed her to explore the fluidity of her personality. We all possess this innate malleability to our identities, but I've never heard it described quite like this.
If you stay in one place, you can create one personhood. You have one bedroom. It always looks the same. If you keep moving, that just gets smashed up all the time. I mean, like, who you were in one place that worked well, you're now in another school, and you walk into the lunchroom and nobody wants to be friends with that girl. And I think a lot of actors really do have that in common. They get that personality is kind of just like what you're cherry picking that day.
Even though she attended a specialized arts program throughout high school, her young adult years were spent at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., majoring in economics. Despite her creative tendencies, Brit had the reputation for being a brainiac. She was arguably the epitome of a rule follower, an excellent sheep, graduating as valedictorian, and on the way, scoring a summer internship with the investment banking behemoth, Goldman Sachs. Like many other Ivy League and Russell Group students, Brit was somewhat of an insecure overachiever, caught up in the salmon run of fresh graduates frantically chasing lucrative careers. This frantic salmon run is the focus of William Derezowitz's book, Excellent Sheep, The Miseducation of the American Elite. It analyzes how higher education conditions young people to prioritize a passion for success over an authentic calling. Derezowitz claims that chasing credentialism like Goldman Sachs, investment banking, Fulbright, law school, Harvard is arguably a hollow quest and a poor substitute for pursuing something more meaningful. Fueled by this passion for success and hollow credentialism, Brit soon became disenfranchised with Wall Street's tendency to exploit young people with incredible ambition and work ethic, but little guidance or inspiration for what to do next with their lives. This is reminiscent of investor Paul Graham's Do What You Love essay, in which he points out that a comparatively safe and prosperous career with some automatic baseline prestige is dangerously tempting to someone young who hasn't thought much about what they really like. But what does the story of an overachieving Wall Street summer analyst have to do with indie filmmaking? Well, there's an important detail we left out.
I'm going to tell you about two students that I met here at Georgetown, and their names are Zal and Mike. When I was a freshman, Zal was a junior in my Shakespeare class. He was the kind of super annoying student who came late every day to class carrying nothing but a cookie from Weissmiller's, which he would eat during class in the back row. And then, when called upon, would say the kind of profoundly intelligent, meme-breaking thing that would take everyone's breath away, including the professor. Mike was a senior. He had a strange allure on campus. He wore a lot of man jewelry. He skateboarded in between classes. He talked with a kind of yo, yo, yo that made it hard to tell if he was a linguistics student and he was data gathering your impression of him, or if he actually thought of himself as a white rapper.
In Brit's freshman year at Georgetown, Zal and Mike won the Best Film Prize for a short they'd created at the university's inaugural Student Film Festival.
And we won that film festival. We were brought up on stage and there was a standing ovation for us, and leading that standing ovation was a 17-year-old girl clapping really big. And I was like, Mike, look at that girl, she's glowing. And that was Brit Marling.
And so began the stalking.
Then I stalked Zal in a supermarket. I followed him up and down the aisles as he was picking out juice. He spends a long time picking out his juice. Could I come do lights on your movie? And Zal kind of looked at me, and I was like, oh, this is going so badly. And then he was like, well, maybe you could be in the movie. And I was like, well, we could try that.
The three formed an informal filmmaking collective, using low-budget ninja tactics to get their films made.
And I walked across the street in costume with a yoga mat, and I walked into the prison, and I was like, hi, I'm here to teach yoga, as if like I do this all the time there. And they were like, oh, okay, hold on, come in. And so I came to the prison, and I like kind of signed in, and then I was like, I forgot something in the car, critical. I dropped the yoga mat, I turned around and walked out, and Mike filmed it from across the street, like in the driver's seat of the car as I like walk out of the prison.
Before sneaking into prisons and making indie films with Zal and Mike, Brit first had to get out of Wall Street. Back to Goldman Sachs.
I had been there for a period. I was a new analyst, but I happened to be staffed on 2 companies where they're having IPOs at the same time. So the volume of work was crazy. And I got sick, and there was really no time for that, you know, so you had to just be there anyway. And then I was also just sad, you know, like I would go home from work and sometimes just cry. And it wasn't just like a few tears, it was the kind of existential crying of like, it was heartbreak. I was heartbroken.
As Brit was battling with whether to take her prescribed antidepressants to numb her gnawing depression, she got a visit from Zal and Mike.
They were coming up to New York for a 48-hour film festival. And they were like, we're gonna make this film, you get a topic, you get 48 hours to do it, like, be involved. And I was thinking in my rational mind—
While you're at Goldman.
While I'm at Goldman. I was thinking in my rational mind, I'm on 2 projects that have IPOs, I should really spend all day Saturday and Sunday at the office. But then here are my friends, and they wanna do this fun thing. And so I took the leap, and we did it. And we got a topic, we didn't sleep for 48 hours, we just made this film over the weekend. It was a total piece of shit, but I had so much fun. And I was like, okay, I can work my butt off doing something that I love, and it's dangerous, and I may never make any money, you know, and I may be broke all the time, but I'll be happy, I'll be delighted, like, or I can do this thing that doesn't feel right in my body, where I know there are predictable, safe outcomes. And to me, suddenly then it actually wasn't a choice anymore.
This growing doubt as to whether she was on the right path crescendoed into a peak after traveling with Mike to Cuba to shoot a micro-budget documentary on the US-Cuba conflict in boxers and ballerinas.
And I was like, well, my Spanish isn't that good, and I don't think I really want to be a documentary filmmaker, but you kind of just leap and say yes, and then you're there. And in retrospect now, I look back at that, and I'm like, oh, well, of course, the juxtaposition of like this one life in Manhattan versus going to Cuba and like having this experience where you became acutely aware of how important it is to you to love what you do, and how not important it is to you to have a lot of things.
Right.
And like that, those experiences side by side, smack together, just totally change the trajectory of my life. But you can't, when you're in it, it just feels like chaos.
And when things seem like they're in chaos, that's often when things start getting really interesting. In 2005, Zal had been accepted to the American Film Institute in Los Angeles. He convinced both Brit and Mike to pack their bags into his station wagon and move out to LA. 2 econ grads and an anthropology major, the crew started trying to make a name for themselves in Hollywood, and so began what Brit describes as a period of self-commodification.
Tell the chainsaw story.
Oh God, I went in to read for something and I got a call back and I was so excited. And you know, when I would get a call back, like Zal and Mike and I would celebrate, oh, she got a call back, like maybe this is an offer or not. It was for this movie in which like basically by the second act, everyone's had something cut off, you know? And I was like in the thing doing the reading, and I was like, okay, so you want me to just go to the part where the chainsaw guy comes in and then stop, right? And they're like, no, just go all the way through, act all the way through. And I was like, okay. So I like do the scene, and then I'm like, okay, you know, lying on the floor. Somebody's like cutting my leg off, oh my God, you know? And then by the time I got out of that audition, I was on the street and I was like, I just pretended to have like all my limbs hacked off in some sad room in the valley. Like, why? Why am I doing
That was
this?
it, you were done after that.
I was done after that.
You're just trying to get the part, you know? And at some point in one of those lines, I was standing there and looking at us, this group of women all desperate for this role, a bad role in a bad thing, you know, in skirts, hair blown out, a lot of makeup on, standing in the hot sun, waiting to come in and do these like 2 lines that are like, oh no, don't, no, help, stop, you know? And it's like, what the fuck am I doing here? This is crazy. For all of us, this is crazy. And so at that point, I was like, okay, either I gotta leave and find a new thing, or I have to figure out how to become a storyteller.
In rosy retrospect, I think it's difficult to really grasp how difficult this period must have been. Imagine taking a left turn away from a secure, extremely lucrative career of conventional success into the reeking desperation of LA's cutthroat audition culture. Despite the fact her new life in LA was in many ways as dispiriting as her old life in Manhattan, Brit felt something propelling her towards a more intuitive calling. Brit immersed herself in plays, scripts, and iconic narratives like Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs or Holly Hunter in The Piano. Soon she began conceptualizing screenwriting as a mathematical process, similar to the proofs she would spend hours cracking during her late-night sessions in the Georgetown Library.
I think of screenwriting as a kind of economic proof. It's not a novel, you know, you can't digress, you know, endlessly. You're doing everything as part for whole, metonymy, you know, what's a single moment or scene that can stand in for a lifetime inside a relationship. So those hours in the library, like learning to think that way about not embellishing, but getting really specific and pointed about variables and how they come together to equal something.
And Brit wanted to be an actress, and so she had the idea, why don't we just teach ourselves how to write? And I was like, how do we teach ourselves how to write? And Brit had a lot of confidence that she could learn things. I didn't have that kind of confidence. So we set out to different libraries all over town, maybe the Beverly Hills Public Library, the Los Feliz Library, the Downtown Library, which is a really great one if you guys haven't been down there. And we taught ourselves over, I guess, 3 or 4 years how to write. And we wrote a script called Sound of My Voice that we were proud of. And we tried to get it made. But of course, no one wants to make a movie with a first-time director.
And an actress who isn't in SAG and hasn't even been in like a car commercial.
And so that proved hard.
The crew spent the next few years writing. Brit and Zal wrote Daydream of Spies, but unsurprisingly found that nobody in town would produce a $30 million action film with a no-name lead and unknown director. Soon, 2 more practical projects took shape. The first was Another Earth, to be directed by Mike Cahill for $150,000. The film was based on the premise of externalizing our inner dialogues and manifesting them into a parallel world inhabited by doppelgangers.
I mean, Another Earth, we just started shooting. We went to Mike's mom's house because it was the one place we could stay for free and eat for free. And we shot in Mike's mom's school, and we used Mike's mom's car and cast Mike's mom in the movie, and she was also the security, and it was the Mike's mom show.
The second, Sound of My Voice, was directed by Zal for $130,000. It follows a documentary duo looking to expose a cult leader in the Valley of Los Angeles.
We shot Sound of My Voice for $130,000 on 4 7Ds that we borrowed from different people. We were so broke that we would buy an Apple computer from an Apple store and then on the 13th day return it and go to another Apple store. This is a true story.
After arriving in LA in 2005, the group's hard work was rewarded, as both films not only were accepted to the 2011 edition of Sundance, but were picked up by Fox Searchlight for distribution. At the Sundance Film Festival, Brit joined a generation of indie filmmakers, from Drake Doremus to Jeff Nichols, who were embodying DIY filmmaking.
The cavalry is not coming.
Brit was rewarded with acting roles that she wouldn't even get near reading for a week prior, including The Keeping Room, The Company You Keep, and Arbitrage. But Brit didn't lose her DIY spirit soon after creating The East with Zal, inspired by a summer they'd spent in the US living off the grid with a group of freegans sustaining themselves by recovering food waste. Now able to command higher resources in an A-list cast, the two turned their eyes to developing a longer-form narrative. Brit and Zal dove into the process of writing the OA, despite criticism from their filmmaking peers about moving into TV. Many of the stories on TV had their narratives structured around selling products during commercial breaks, which arguably inhibited their artistic merit. Brit found a powerful pairing with Netflix, allowing her and Zal to challenge the medium by leveraging the tech company's mantra to disrupt and take risks. As most of Brit's work can be categorized as more grounded science philosophy than science fiction, the longer format of TV provided the perfect vehicle to set up high-concept fictional worlds. However, partnering with Netflix, a tech company constantly iterating on its business model, came with serious risks regarding the show's longevity, risks that ended up proving catastrophic. Widely praised, the OA continued on the platform for 2 successful seasons. However, a cult following often isn't enough to ensure shows continue receiving funding from a streamer like Netflix, who cut the show, as they were arguably more focused on attracting new users to the platform rather than retaining old ones. In the disappointing fallout of the cancellation, Brit reflected on her career and noticed a pattern to the parts she was being offered. Sharing her reflections in the New York Times, Brit stated, "But the more I acted the strong female lead, the more I became aware of the narrow specificity of the character's strengths, physical prowess, linear ambition, focused rationality, masculine modalities of power." Because what we really mean when we say we want strong female leads is give me a man but in the body of a woman I still want to see naked. Drawing parallels to her time at Goldman, Brit saw echoes of this strong female lead archetype in the world of finance, saying, "I wore suits, drank scotch neat, and talked about the women and the men I was sleeping with like commodities on an open market. I buried my feminine intelligence alive in order to survive." This represents a powerful reoccurring motif throughout Brit's work, which focuses on the creation of new myths and narratives to make sense of reality. In her letter announcing the cancellation of the OA, she states, "We are hundreds of years overdue new mythologies, stories with modes of power outside violence and domination, stories with goals for human agency outside conquest and colonization." Comparing the traditional hero's journey of inciting incident, rising tension, explosive climax, and denouement to a male-centric conception of pleasure, Brit suggests a new feminine-centric construction of the age-old narrative structure. Drawing on the works of Octavia Butler, Ursula Le Guin, Toni Morrison, and Margaret Atwood, this divergence from conventional masculine mythology reflects the different strengths a heroine may wield over a traditional male hero. However, there are countless creators experimenting with unconventional story structures. What made Brit Marling's work stand out? Firstly, oral storytelling. Like Jim Cummings and Pete Docter, the group heavily relied on developing narratives orally. Importantly, this ensures enough time goes into the often underestimated outlining phase of screenwriting.
We don't write anything down until we can pitch it to just someone in a coffee shop from beginning to end as a verbal story, and that person is held and compelled.
I have this inclination right now to just be like, oh, I want to open final draft and just like get some scenes out so that I can prove to myself that I've accomplished something. But you never really want to start writing until you first have, a log line, or let's say 2 to 3 sentences that you could tell your grandmother, you could tell your best friend, you could tell a kid on the street, and it has some sort of hook in it that makes them lean in.
Secondly, tribal filmmaking.
I mean, the thing I can think of that leaps to mind the most is the idea of tribalism, I feel like that's the thing that's effective when you're starting out. You really can't do anything alone.
Brit often dispels the myth of the singular creative genius and credits her collaborative mentality for most, if not all, of her success.
2 of my classmates from Georgetown, Zal Botmonglich and Mike Cahill, we all moved out here together. We didn't know anybody, we didn't even know somebody who worked in the mailroom at one of the agencies. But we were all living together in a house, and we were trying to make things, and we were writing and rewriting and editing and re-editing short films, and we were reinforcing each other. So, we would get small jobs doing gigs on reality TV shows, and that would pay the bills for a while, but always we were nurturing this sort of tidal pool of ideas between the 3 of us. And I think if we hadn't had that early ecosystem, I'm not sure we would have survived that transition.
Brit's career and desire to spark evolution in the field of storytelling serves as a bright guiding light for those of us wishing to lead a life from a space of intentionality, philanthropy, and love. To finish up, I'll leave you with her words.
And that if you want to do the thing you love and you want to do it well, you've got to be a rule breaker. And the thing about being a valedictorian that's so actually embarrassing and why it's not something to be proud of is it basically is a sign that you've been a rule follower, like a very intense rule follower for a lot of your life. And most of the texts that you've been reading and being indoctrinated by and regurgitating, it means you've never been challenging the status quo. You've never been challenging the thinking. The teacher says, read this, you read it, you spit it up on an exam, and it all keeps going forward. And at some point I just realized, a lot of the thinking about how the world works is wrong. Like, it's all wrong. And it is going to rely on a lot of people breaking the rules in order for things to get better. And filmmaking is a big part of that, maybe, young people making movies and going out to Hollywood and being like, oh no, I'm not gonna sell my first script to have somebody else fuck it up. I'm gonna make it for $15 if I have to, and that will be a more interesting life. I will be living a more interesting life than if I sell it for $20,000 so I can call my mom and be like, Mom, I'm okay, I promise,